I'm Captain Ryan Blake. I'm 38 years old, and I serve as a logistics officer in the United States Army. The day I got that call from command, something shifted in me. It was a chill in my gut, not fear exactly, but the kind of tight pull you feel right before a storm. I knew something was wrong before I even picked up. The tone in my colonel's voice, the clipped words, the way he didn't bother with small talk. He just said, we needed to speak in person, and gave me a time, no details. That's never a good sign in the military. I stared at the phone in my hand for a long time after the call ended. My mind flashed back to all the little signs I had ignored over the past few weeks. Sudden changes in assignment paperwork, a canceled trip that was never rescheduled, a few cold stares in meetings from officers I used to laugh with. Even my staff sergeant had grown quiet, less open, like he knew something I didn't, and maybe he did. But I just kept pushing through like I always had. Mission first, always. I've given the Army everything. 15 years of service, 3 deployments, and countless nights spent coordinating supply chains across continents. My job wasn't flashy, but it kept missions alive. Food, ammunition, med-evac timing. I was the guy who made sure soldiers had what they needed, when they needed it. And I did it well. I didn't chase medals. I chased precision. And I thought that meant something. I've missed so much over the years. My son's 3rd birthday. Our 10th anniversary. I once video called my wife Melissa from a transport tent in Baghdad while mortars thumped in the distance. I told her I'd make it home for Christmas, then missed it by 2 weeks. She tried to smile through the screen, holding up a snow globe, Ben picked out for me. I remember thinking, I'll make it right when I get home. But home kept getting pushed further and further away. So when I got in the car that morning, headed to base, my hands on the steering wheel were already sweaty. It was like my body knew before my brain could catch up. The sun hadn't even come up yet, but I could feel a weight pressing on my chest. I wasn't just driving to a meeting, I was driving into something I couldn't name yet. But it was coming, and I could feel it closing in. I pulled into the base just after sunrise. The gate guard gave me a stiff nod, like he already knew something I didn't. Every step toward headquarters felt heavier than the last. I kept telling myself it was probably just a reassignment or a budget cut, something minor, something I could fix. But deep down, I already knew this wasn't about paperwork. When I walked into Colonel Harding's office, he didn't offer a handshake. He didn't even look me in the eye. There was a sealed envelope on his desk with my name printed in black ink. He slid it across the desk and cleared his throat like he was choking on the words. 15 years of service. And that's what I got. One envelope. One sentence. Due to ongoing restructuring, your position is being dissolved. That was it. No thanks for your dedication. No recognition of sacrifice, no mention of the lives I helped save with that last mission. Just a generic phrase, cold and clinical, as if I'd been nothing more than a line item on a spreadsheet. I didn't even hear the rest of what Harding said. My ears were ringing. My mind couldn't process the fact that everything I had built, everything I had given up, was being erased in an instant. I sat there, staring at the letter while he explained the transition process, the exit protocol, the handover of responsibilities. I could see his mouth moving, but none of it registered. My chest felt hollow, like someone had reached in and pulled something out. I thought of my son, of the late-night logistics reports, of missing entire holidays because the mission came first. And for what? Just before I stood to leave, Harding added one last thing. He said the commendation report for the recent operation had already been filed. The one in Kandahar, the one where I rerouted critical supplies through a blocked corridor, kept a stranded unit alive, and personally coordinated the airlift. That operation had saved over 50 lives. It was the proudest moment of my career. But my name wasn't on it. He said it had been submitted under Colonel Davis, the same Davis who never set foot near the mission zone. The same Davis who spent the entire operation in a secure office chair, issuing orders based on intel I gathered. I couldn't even speak. My jaw clenched so hard it ached. I wanted to flip the desk, shout, demand justice. But I knew it wouldn't change anything. They'd already made their choice. I walked out of that office in a fog. My boots felt like they were filled with concrete. As I passed by the younger officers in the hallway, some nodded politely, others looked away. No one asked what happened. No one had to. They all knew. In the Army, word spreads fast. And once the machine decides you're obsolete, no one wants to stand too close. When I got back to my truck, I sat there for nearly an hour, staring through the windshield. I kept going over the mission in my head, trying to make sense of how they could steal something so personal, so defining. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was an erasure. They didn't just fire me, they rewrote the story and cut me out of it completely. And in that moment, something inside me broke. The house was quiet when I walked in, but not the kind of quiet that feels peaceful. It was the kind that hangs in the air like something unfinished. My boots landed heavy on the tile and no one looked up. Melissa was in the kitchen, pacing with her phone to her ear. Her voice was low, clipped, talking about insurance or a school meeting or maybe something with her mother. I couldn't tell. She glanced my way for a half-second, gave a tight smile, then turned her back to me and kept talking. I stood there with my hands in my pockets, unsure if I should wait or just blurt it out. In the living room, my son Ben was on the couch with a controller in his hands. Some loud, chaotic game filled the space around him, but he didn't seem to hear it. He didn't even glance up when I walked past. I wanted to say something, ask him how his day was, maybe just hear his voice. But the moment didn't feel open for that. It felt like I had stepped into someone else's life. I put my keys on the counter, took a deep breath, and tried to say it. I told Melissa I was out, discharged. 15 years, over just like that. She ended her call, nodded once, and asked me what I was going to do next. That was it. No surprise, no questions, just the next step. I said I didn't know. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like the only truth I had left. She didn't say anything else, just went back to cleaning up dinner dishes that I hadn't been there to eat. I stood in that kitchen and felt like a ghost in my own home. Later that night, I sat on the edge of my son's bed. He had already fallen asleep, the controller still in his hand. I brushed the hair from his forehead and wondered if he even noticed I was home early, or if he remembered what I did, what I gave up, or if, to him, I was just the guy who always came back tired and left again before breakfast. I walked back to the kitchen and stared out the window into the dark. The house was full of everything I'd tried to protect all these years, but standing there, I realized I didn't belong in it anymore. I'd been invisible in the Army by the time they let me go. Now I was invisible at home too, and that, somehow, hurt even more. 3 days after they let me go, I found myself at the kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee and nothing to do but think. Sleep hadn't come easy. The silence around the house pressed on me like a weight I couldn't shake. I tried to distract myself, cleaned the garage, organized tools, watched mindless news. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw that envelope sliding across the desk. That morning, something in me snapped. I opened my old Army laptop, powered it up, and started digging through files from the Kandahar mission. I didn't know what I was looking for exactly. Maybe proof, maybe closure, or maybe just a reason to believe it hadn't all been for nothing. I searched through draft after draft of the mission reports, logistics chains, timeline logs, comm records. I knew that op inside and out. I'd spent months planning it, adjusting details, making last-minute calls that saved lives. I expected to find my fingerprints all over it, but I didn't. The final mission summary had no mention of me. Not one. Where my name had been on the preliminary reports, it was now gone. In its place, under the heading Operation Lead, was Colonel Richard Davis. He'd never even left Fort Carson. I stared at the screen, scrolling slowly, hoping it was a mistake. But every page told the same lie. The routing maps I had drawn, the call signs I had personally confirmed, the supply reroute I authorized under fire, all of it credited to someone who never touched the dirt. My chest went tight. I stood up, backed away from the table, tried to breathe. It felt like being buried alive, like my career was being erased in real time. They hadn't just discharged me. They'd made sure no one would ever remember I was there. I sat back down, my fingers trembling as I opened a new tab. I typed in the name Lydia Grant. She was a defense systems analyst I'd worked with briefly 2 years ago. Smart, sharp, independent. The kind of person who remembered details. I found her website. She was consulting now, still doing contract review work. I opened my email. I didn't know what to say, so I just started typing. Told her I hoped she was well, that I'd recently separated from service, that I had a question about the Kandahar mission. I kept it vague at first, said I noticed some inconsistencies in the final documentation and wanted to ask if she recalled anything about the early reports. Before hitting send, I stared at the screen. It felt desperate, like I was grasping for something that might not be there. But I needed to know. I needed someone outside the system to tell me I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't making this all up in my head. I clicked send, sat back, and waited, not expecting a response, not really expecting anything. But somewhere deep down, I hoped Lydia still remembered who really ran that mission. Lydia replied less than a day later. Her message was short but hit harder than I expected. She remembered the mission. She remembered the early drafts with my name and her own review notes. Then she said what I feared but needed to hear. The final report had been tampered with. It wasn't just an oversight, it was deliberate. She told me it wasn't the first time something like this had happened. Quiet removals, career erasures. Veterans discarded after their usefulness ran dry. Her tone wasn't angry, it was calm, matter of fact. But there was something else in it too. Resolve. She ended her note with a single thought. If they can erase you, they can erase anyone. Maybe it's time someone built something that can't be rewritten. That line stuck with me all day. I took it on my morning walk, sat with it in the garage, let it loop through my mind while I watched Ben play. I kept thinking about how many guys I'd served with who got pushed out the same way. Some were better soldiers than me, smarter, braver, but the system didn't care. Not once they stopped fitting in the box. I didn't know what I had to offer anymore. I wasn't a colonel. I wasn't a hero with medals. But I knew logistics. I knew people. I knew how to build things under pressure and keep them running when everything else fell apart. Maybe that was enough. Maybe if I couldn't go back to what I was, I could build something better from the ground up. That night, I cleared off the kitchen table and started sketching ideas. It wasn't much, just a name, a mission, a dream, a place that would welcome veterans like me. Not with pity, with purpose, a space to train, to share skills, to support one another without the red tape. I didn't know how to fund it or scale it, but I knew why it mattered. Melissa walked past at one point, glanced down at the notes, and asked what I was doing. I said I wasn't sure yet, but it felt important. She didn't say anything, just nodded once and kept walking. But her silence wasn't cold this time. It felt like space, like maybe she was leaving room for something new. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. Not because everything was fixed, but because something was beginning. Something that was mine. And no one could take that away. Fear doesn't always come loud. Sometimes it sits in the corner of the room while you try to focus, whispering that you're not enough. That's what it felt like when I stared at the blank page where my plan for Valorize was supposed to go. I didn't have funding, no staff, no website, just a rough name and this gut feeling that what I was trying to build needed to exist. But every time I tried to map it out, the doubts crept in. Who would trust me? Why would anyone listen? Melissa wasn't convinced either. She didn't say it outright, but her quiet sighs and cautious glances spoke loud enough. I couldn't blame her. I'd lost everything we had depended on. Now I was chasing some fragile dream built from scraps of dignity and memory. Still, something kept me going. I kept writing, outlining services, defining values, imagining the kind of veteran center I wished had existed when I came home from my first tour. I wanted this place to be grounded in action, not just words. A place where guys like me weren't told to move on, but were given the tools to rebuild. Even as the fear sat heavy in my chest, I kept typing. It wasn't a polished plan, it wasn't even close, but it was a beginning. And beginnings, no matter how shaky, are louder than silence. I started small. Just a rough logo I made in a free design app and a basic website built late at night while the house was quiet. No staff. No big announcement. Just me, a mission, and a single page that said Valorize is here for veterans ready to rebuild. I sent emails to everyone I knew. Most never replied. Posted on social media. Got a few likes, some pity comments, nothing more. I applied for a small local grant and was rejected twice. But I kept showing up, kept refining the message, tightening the vision. Somewhere deep down, I believed this wasn't just for me anymore. Then, one day, I got an email from a guy named Hector, Marine vet. Said he saw the post and wasn't sure what this Valorize thing was, but he needed to talk. A week later, another message, then another. It was slow, uneven, but something had shifted. We didn't have a building. We didn't have uniforms or shiny posters, but we had each other. We had this fire that kept flickering no matter how many times the wind tried to kill it. Brick by brick, name by name, Valorize was becoming more than an idea. It was becoming a place where veterans found something they didn't know they were missing. A reason to try again. It came on a Tuesday morning. No return address. Just a plain manila envelope sitting in the mailbox outside the shared co-working space we were using as the Valorize office. I almost threw it away, thought it was junk. But something about it felt heavy. Inside were printed documents, creased like they'd been hidden for a while. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then I saw it. My name, my original signature, the mission reports, proposal drafts, everything from the operation they erased me from. And then came the real gut punch. Internal emails, screenshots, notes between Colonel Davis and 2 other officers. They talked about removing my name, about positioning him as the sole lead. It wasn't speculation, it was strategy. My hands started to shake. Not from anger, from shock. The proof I thought I'd never see was sitting in front of me. Everything they did, every lie, every step they took to bury my work. It was all here, black and white, undeniable. I stared at it for what felt like hours. Part of me wanted to scream. Another part wanted to burn it. But the part that had built Valorize, the one that had survived the humiliation and kept going, knew what this was. It was a chance, not just for revenge, for justice, for truth. They had stolen my name from a page. Now I had the page that could write it back in. I didn't sleep that night. I scanned every page, every email, every timestamp, then reached out to a friend who still had ties with a military watchdog publication. From there, it spread like wildfire. I shared the documents with veteran advocacy groups, a few trusted journalists, and one congressman I'd met during an outreach campaign. Within 48 hours, the story hit the front page of several military news outlets. Colonel Davis's name was everywhere, but not in the way he'd hoped. Headlines called it what it was, a cover-up. The military launched a formal investigation. Whistleblower protections kicked in. My phone rang nonstop. Reporters, former soldiers, even people I hadn't spoken to in years. They all wanted to know how we did it, how we stood up. Valorize went from a whisper to a shout. We weren't just helping vets anymore. We had become a symbol. Proof that doing the right thing still mattered, even when the system said otherwise. I wasn't chasing validation anymore. I had found it in the truth, in action, in the voices that finally believed. Colonel Davis resigned within a week. The investigation led to a sweeping review of the old command structure, and several others were quietly shown the door. The house of cards they built had finally collapsed. Not with a bang, but under the steady weight of the truth. Valorize kept growing. Donations increased, veterans reached out, and I was invited to speak at forums I never imagined I'd step into. Reporters asked for interviews. Senators quoted us. But none of that meant more than the look on my son's face the night he came to one of my talks. He didn't say much, just smiled and said he was proud of me. And that was it. I didn't win by taking them down. I won by standing up, by showing him and myself that doing the right thing is the kind of strength no one can strip from you.